All right, hi everyone. This is your third training, and the purpose of this training for Finding Your Voice is to get you ready to recognize, prevent, and report any child abuse. And this is going to be important for you because we are working with adolescents and children under the age of 18. And so it's important to understand these things, particularly at camp, so you know when and what to report. So the first thing we're going to start with is physical abuse. So there are some injuries that are visible in nature. Those include bruises, black eyes, burns, and cuts. And it's really important that if you do notice any of these injuries, that you ask the girl where she got them. And so you can compare those injuries with the explanation that she gives you to see whether or not that's a realistic explanation. Because what we need to remember is that during this age, it's very normal to have skin or knee scrapes, bruises on their knees, elbows, forehead, chins, nose, especially since we are going to be at a camp that's active in nature. And these adolescent girls are outside and active, and so they are going to have some of those things. And so making sure that you kind of compare what the girls are saying to their injury to make sure that's a realistic explanation of that injury. And so the primary areas of physical abuse include the back of the knees and the neck, as well as the back of the arms and the hands. And that's actually part of the defensive mechanism. So if you can think about it, when people, put their arms up in part of a defensive mechanism, they are going to start to get bruises on the back of their hands and arms. And that's actually where 70% of the non-accidental injuries occur in child abuse. And you can look at that figure to the right and you can see all those purple dots, and that's typically where you'll see physical abuse on children. So some physical indicators, you all can read through these. Some things I want to highlight, any kind of unexplained burn or mark or welt or laceration or head injury. Another physical indicator is wetting the bed. This is typically not an age when girls will wet the bed, and they are usually potty trained by that point. And so it definitely means something if they're wetting the bed. And so that will be something that you'll want to report to the camp director and the nurse. Behavioral indicators include being wary of adults, extremely aggressive or withdrawn, being manipulative, possibly even showing signs of self-mutilation. So if you see any signs of cutting, that's important to report. If they express being fearful of going home to their parents or guardians, or on the opposite side, being too protective, like super protective and overprotective of their parents. So those are some behavioral indicators of physical abuse. Emotional abuse include things like emotional abuse is a little bit harder to define, but the best definition includes chronic and persistent acts by an adult that endanger the mental health or emotional development of a child. And when this occurs, it can make the children feel unwanted, unloved, worthless. And so that's the exact opposite, obviously, of what we do in our field. We want them to feel loved and wanted and worth. And so it's important for us to recognize that some things that are going on at home might be causing them to act out a certain way and feel a certain way. And so some behavioral indicators of emotional abuse include being really eager to please an adult, or you are considered an adult in this standpoint. Seek out adult contact, view abuse as being warranted. So if the girls express to you that they think it's okay that, that they are hit, that they kind of deserve, quote unquote, deserved it. If they excessively are anxious or depressed, unwilling to discuss any problems, if they kind of show bizarre behaviors and overly being aggressive, if they have unprovoked fits of yelling or screaming, if they're impatient, if they sabotage situations, if they're unable to communicate their feelings. Also, it lists being low in self-esteem and low in self-confidence, but those are often kind of normal behavioral patterns of middle school girls. And so really important thing here is unnatural, or I guess like not normal behaviors of middle school girls, excessive yelling, kind of overly anxious, those type of things that aren't really normal, I think are the things to start paying attention to and report. Some physical indicators of emotional abuse include having nightmares or being restless, and we only have 2 nights with them, but still is important to look into, being super hyperactive, and then also eating disorders are a way of showing that they've been emotionally abused. And so if you start to see your girls exhibiting some behaviors of eating disorders, that's important to note as well. Sexual abuse is denoted as sexual mistreatment of a child by an adult or an older child. There are two forms, indirect and direct. Indirect includes the voyeurism, which is observing a child undress or bathe, adult or other child exposing him or herself to the child, and pornography of the child or shown to the child. These are all indirect forms of sexual abuse. Direct forms of sexual abuse is any direct sexual contact between a child and an adult or older child. Behaviors of those who have experienced sexual abuse include being reluctant to change clothes in front of others. Now, this is kind of a tricky thing because during adolescence, a lot of girls don't like to change in front of their others, so it's not uncommon for them to go into the bathroom and change. But if it seems to be very excessive, that's something to note. If they are overly withdrawn or manipulative, if they have sexual knowledge beyond that of their developmental stage, so if they're talking about sexual things a lot, A, that's not appropriate, but B, that might be a sign that they've experienced some sexual abuse. Again, eating disorders, problems with authority and rules, feeling anxious, extreme compliance or defiance issues, unable to participate in sport activities, and feeling self-conscious. Other physical indicators, these include having pain or itching in their genital area, difficulty walking or sitting, if they're wetting the bed, again, an indicator of abuse, and experiencing pain when urinating. So if any of those things are happening, I think the physical indicators are probably a little bit more easy to see, not necessarily see, but kind of to understand as actual indicators of sexual abuse. But those behavioral indicators are also very important. Neglect. This is defined as when parents or guardians fail to provide basic needs of the child. And if you think about basic needs, we need to go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So clothing and shelter and food. This also includes medical supervision and care. And so if the parents are failing to do that, or the guardian is failing to do that, that's considered neglect. So types of neglect include failure to thrive, filth and infestation, environmental deprivation, exposure to elements, this can include drugs, and medical deprivation, not getting the medication that the girls actually need. Some behavioral indicators of neglect include if they beg or steal for food, that's an indicator that they may not have access to food on a regular basis, which is a form of neglect. Extreme dependency or detachment, engagement in delinquent behaviors or stealing, again, objects are something that they don't normally have access to, and so they kind of want to steal those. Appears to be exhausted, maybe an indicator that they're not getting sleep, and states frequent or continual absence of parent or guardian. Physical indicators include looking dirty or unwashed, like they haven't been bathed in a while, if they're overly hungry, if they're inappropriately dressed, tired, if they have unattainable physical problems, if they appeared overworked or exploited. Again, things that are just extremely out of the ordinary for adolescent girls in that age group. So now I wanted to kind of go through discipline versus abuse and what that looks like. So over the next 3 slides, you're going to kind of see discipline is, and then a few bullets, and then what abuse is, and then a few bullets. So you can kind of compare and contrast. Discipline is positive methods of training a child towards self-control and self-concept and confidence, and it's designed to teach a child a healthy sense of independence. And I think the key there is positivity. Abuse is satisfying the adult's need while imposing socially unacceptable control of the child. Socially unacceptable control of the child. That's key. Also, it's fostering unhealthy dependency. Discipline is flexibility to adapt to different developmental needs and changes of the child. And this is going to be very important in camp because you're going to get a very different developments based on the girl's age, because middle school can include anywhere from 10 years old to I've actually had a 15-year-old in middle school. And so they're all going to be a little bit different developmentally. You need to encourage the children to learn social behaviors and ways of expressing their natural desires and drives in a way that's socially acceptable. Abuse is placing unrealistic demands or expectations on the children, and also as a result of the adults failing to meet their own needs and desires through appropriate channels. And so usually the adults are taking issues out on the children. Discipline is enhancing the child's sense of self-worth and pride in their abilities and accomplishments, and teaching by example. So that means you, as a camp counselor, leading by example and showing the girls what is appropriate behavior. That includes not being on your cell phones. That also includes having a positive attitude and outlook on life. Also includes being self-confident, right, and feeling like you can try anything. Preventing abusive situations. So there are 4 primary steps that you can do. First, don't discipline children when you're upset. So if you need to take a moment, take 30 seconds, a minute, whatever you need. Make sure there's other camp counselors as well as other campers there to calm down and evaluate the situation and think about what's really going on. Second thing, develop a positive mental attitude and a good sense of humor. Most of the time, adolescents are really good at receiving feedback if you maintain positive throughout that feedback. Third, get help from your peers. So share your difficulties with other staff members. Maybe they've experiencing something that's similar to you and they can help you with the situation. And then lastly, try to see it from the child's perspective. Again, we don't know what's going on in their home life. And so it's always good to kind of ask them, well, why are you doing this? Why are you acting out? Or why did you yell at this girl? Whatever it may be, try to see it from their perspective. And that also kind of goes along with taking that few seconds to calm down and let that emotional side of you calm down. So these are some prevention policies that we need to keep in mind, and it's really important for us to keep in mind during camp. First, always be in view of others. So we need to have 3 people together at all times. You're never going to be alone with one of the campers. So you either need another camper with you or another camp counselor with you so that there's 3 people total together in a group. Do not allow program participants in private staff areas. This includes offices as well as the staff camping area. And so you all, as camp counselors, will stay with the campers. However, the other camp staff, like myself or the current camp director, will be with Denise and the nurse and some other actual full-time staff, adult staff, not camp counselors. Also, don't share your romantic life with your campers. It's easiest just to keep that separate, and if they do mention it, just say that's not appropriate things to talk about, and move on to something that is, like their experience with kayaking, or how they enjoyed rock climbing, or some of their fears, or things that they're looking forward to. Just keep it away from your own personal life. Supervise private activities in pairs. So like we said, make sure you have at least 3 people with you. Have a double counselor coverage while campers are showering or changing clothes. So anytime they are showering or changing clothes, 2 camp counselors need to be in that cabin at once. Stay out of the cabins you are not assigned to or have no specific camp business in. So don't go in other cabins. No hazing or use of physical punishment at any time, and limit pillow fights, wrestling, water fights, things that can be interpreted as inappropriate from the outsider's perspective. Limit your contact with campers outside of the program. Do not give your personal contact information. It's going to be tempting because a lot of these girls are going to have Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and cell phones, and so they're going to want to get your cell phone number and friend you on Facebook and all of those avenues. Just don't do that. If they do want to be in contact with you, you can say, yeah, I could be with your friend through the Finding Your Voice Instagram page. Okay, so that is what they can friend, is the Finding Your Voice Instagram page and Facebook. Report any injuries or unusual behavior, and this would include injuries that may have occurred prior to coming to camp. So on Friday evening when you have your girls, if you notice that one of your girls has some of these signs or symptoms of any of the abuse, you need to make sure that you let myself know or the current camp director know so that we can kind of make the next best steps. So what can lead to allegations of child abuse? Supervision of shower by one staff member, which we're not going to do. Staff taking campers to the staff member's home, which we're not going to do. And staff and campers sharing a bunk, which we're not going to do. What else to report? Well, this is kind of the most important thing for you guys to know. If you see anything that's inappropriate, that you even have the slightest hunch about, you need to let the camp director know or myself know. I am the camp director for this year. So any direct observation or evidence of sexual activity between campers. You also need to report any display or demonstration of sexual activity, abuse, insinuation of abuse, or evidence of abuse, abusive conduct towards a minor. You need to report any sexual advances or sexual activity of any kind between any person and minor. And you need to report any infliction of physical abuse, behavior, or bodily injury. So again, report. You also need to report physical neglect of a minor, including failure to provide adequate supervision in relation to the activities of the program. mental or emotional injury to a minor, the presence or possession of obscene or pornographic materials at any time, the presence, possession, or being under the influence of any illegal or illicit drug, or the consumption of any illegal or illicit drug or alcohol while on site. You guys know that the campers need to, when they check in, they're going to check in any kind of medication that they're bringing so that the nurse will have it. As camp counselors, you too will check in any medication that you have so that it's not even close to being available to those girls. So if you have Advil that you take daily, you need to make sure that you give that to the nurse when you come to camp so that you can get that when needed. What else to report? You need to report anyone working with individuals under the age of 18 is required by Clemson University's policies to report evidence of child abuse to the appropriate authorities. How this chain of command is going to work is if you think something is inappropriate or you think that there is some sort of child abuse happening, you need to let the camp director know, and so that way the camp director or myself, right, can go on and make the appropriate next best steps. Child abuse agencies do not report the name of the persons or the people who report the suspect abuse to the parents. So your name will be protected. You won't be in any kind of legal or issue so you could feel safe that your name is not going to get out there. If you have any reason to believe a child may be or has been abused or neglected, you need to contact myself, Denise, or the current camp director immediately. Upon first suspicion of an instance of child abuse, the following steps need to be taken. And I know this is repetitive, but I want to drive this in. Okay, so the following steps need to be taken upon first suspicion of instance of child abuse. First, report your suspicions immediately to myself or the current camp director. Do not treat your suspicions as frivolous. Second, whatever your suspicions are, keep them confidential. Do not discuss with any other camp counselors or campers. This needs to be confidential and discuss it directly with the camp director. How will you respond to a victim? Well, do not ask the victims why they didn't say anything earlier, right? You don't want to make them fear or feel guilty or shameful about anything when it's unnecessary, because most of them do say that they don't talk about it out of fear and shame and feeling trapped, like they can't talk about their situation. You need to show signs of respect for their privacy and confidentiality. However, at the same time, under law, you are required to tell myself or the current camp director if there is any sign of child abuse. The subject of the child abuse should not be discussed with the group. If a girl does happen to mention some of these things in a group setting, try to take that girl aside in an area where there is another camp counselor so that there's 3 of you there, but she's not talking about the subject in front of the rest of the group. Also, do not discuss this with any other staff members or campers. Upon first suspicion of an instance of child abuse, the following steps need to be taken. Report the suspicions immediately, and then whatever your suspicions, keep them confidential. I'm repeating this for a reason. So report it immediately to the camp director and keep it confidential. 2 primary things. Other ways that you can help them. Show unconditional love and acceptance of the child. Be willing to listen to them without judgment. Reinforce that them telling you is a good thing and they're doing the right thing and that it's not their fault. And be prepared for some negative behaviors that might exist after they express this to you. Provide examples of healthy relationships, and this could be the staff among the staff and staff among the kids. Encourage victims to get professional help, and be aware of your own physical gestures and actions so that you do model good behavior. Let the camp director and the nurse know right away, and the nurse will be on staff the entire time, 24/7, and we will talk about specific camp emergency procedures for the outdoor lab the Wednesday before camp, and that will be during our normal class time. The Wednesday before camp, we will meet with Leslie Conrad, who's the director of the outdoor lab, to discuss all the situation-specific camp emergency procedures for the outdoor lab. With that, let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to be posting the assignment to Blackboard, and we can talk about this more when we see one another in class. Hope you're getting excited.